Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 45. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you had a good weekend watching a lot of football for conference championships. Unfortunately, my Washington Commanders basically got blown out. It's obvious Eagles are the best defensive team in the NFL, so it'll be an interesting matchup with KC playing a very explosive offense. But Philadelphia has a good offense as well. That line opened up at KC -1.5. I would have had it probably -2.5, and I feel like it will move in the direction of KC here as the week goes. So anyway, let's talk about our lineup for episode 45. We're going to review our wagers as always. We're going to talk about the video that I made yesterday. Sharp put out some really bad information to the general public. He was wrong. I was right. No surprise there. And what's going to dominate this podcast, this is going to be a very, very educational podcast because this is something that I had a light bulb moment here in the last 2 or 3 days, and it's something I'm going to apply to my handicapping unit management system. We're going to talk about why you need to have unit goals for every sport and using a sports calendar to preserve those units gained. It's going to be super educational. So let's dive into last week's wagers. Now, what's crazy is it's going to show that we were down. I think we were at like 2 units last week. Now it's down to 1.93. We actually were profitable last week, cash flow wise. I pay out my mover every Monday or get paid. So we had 2 profitable weeks. A lot of that has to do with like how you're managing units. We had, I think it was Saturday, we wagered 1/10 unit. It went 1 and 3, and then turned around and wagered 1/5 unit on both of our NHL plays. Both of those hit, so that was a positive. But overall, 0.93 units year to date for January. So not bad. Our primary goal for January is not to go in the hole, build some momentum. We've learned a lot. You can see there NCAA basketball has come down a lot, 2.38 units, an absolute brutal skid. And then we've actually made NHL profitable. NHL went into the hole significantly. We were at 1.72 units. We'll show you NHL here. You can see from, 114, we'll highlight it here, up 4.67 units. And then we go in here to NCAA basketball. Look at this. This is mind-blowing here. And we're going to talk about this in part 3. But look at this skid here. This is like 2 and 9, down 9.76 units from 118. So basically the past week. So brutal stretch. Models lost a little bit of edge, not necessarily due to the model, but due to the fact that we're late in the season. December and January market is kind of soft. The further you get in the season, those lines tighten up, makes it more difficult to turn a profit, which we're going to talk about later. But anyway, that's what it is. So still excited where we're at, 0.93 units. Again, we're positive we could have our goals, try to get anywhere from like 3 to 5 units here for January. So we still have a few days left, and hopefully we can hit a few of these NHL plays and get this thing back up to 3 units or so for January. Okay, moving along to, made a video about this. We're not going to bog down and talk a lot about this, but in essence, Steve Fezzik, professional bettor, was on the VSiN podcast show, A Numbers Game with Gil Alexander. And he made this quote: if you bet KC, you must play the money line, not lay the -1.5 or -2. If you're betting Buffalo, you have to take the +2. Do not bet the money line. That was bad advice. His reason was this had the potential to go to overtime. And if it went to overtime, to avoid sudden death, one team might go for 2 instead of kicking a field goal and making it a tie. But the reality of this is, and this is why it's so important, you have to understand numbers. Number one, ironically, this show is called A Numbers Game. Overtime probability is 6%. The odds of an NFL game going to overtime is 6%. And the point I made in a video, if you watched it, and if you didn't, I'll explain it. Teams that win cover 80% of the time. Teams that cover win outright 80% of the time. So the advice he was given was bad advice. Kansas City won the game 32-29. So if you laid minus, I don't know what you had to play for KC, -125, -130, you were paying more than you should have. You should have laid the 1.5 or -2. And if you're playing Buffalo, you should have played Buffalo on the money line and not taken the 2 points. Because if you took the 2 points, now you've lost juice today. Whereas if you'd played on the money line, like I suggested, because it was an 80% chance if Buffalo won, if they covered, they were going to win outright. So anyway, really important point to make on this is that who you take advice from is very important. You have to be a sharp. And my definition of a sharp is somebody that can profit long-term, not a content creator that talks a lot about sports betting, but somebody that can actually profit long-term and has a history of it. And then, but again, just because you are sharp doesn't mean that you can teach the business. And in fact, I would suggest that this sharp here is probably not a good teacher, because that was terrible, terrible advice. Like I've always said, there's two quick paths to failure in life: take advice from everybody and take advice from nobody. So if you want to learn this business, you don't have to learn it from me, but you're going to have to figure out who you are going to learn it from. Because if you take advice from, if you watch 4 or 5 different channels and take advice from all that on YouTube, probably not going to be successful. So find somebody that you respect, that shows a history of a proven track record, follow them, maybe sign up for their service and learn that way. Because otherwise, this guy right here, terrible teacher. Oh, and the point I want to make about that, for example, I am a 3.1 handicapper. My handicap is 3.1 in golf, and that would be extremely good golfer. That's not scratch, not anywhere close to it, but I would be considered a good golfer. I would be a terrible golf teacher because I have an old man swing. I don't move my body. I throw the club, it's way upright. I throw it way up in the backswing. I have to throw it way up in the follow through because I don't shift any weight. Those of you know anything about golf, my clubs are 4 degrees upright, and I do that so I don't have to have any shaft lane. I can just come through impact even. So if somebody tries to get advice from me from golf, I'd be a terrible golf teacher. And I've had people say, hey, give me some advice. I'm like, dude, I'd be a terrible teacher because what I do is so unorthodox. And so I would say I don't know what percentage of people that are sharps that can't teach the business, but it's higher than the people that can't. Meaning the majority of sharps should not be teaching the business. And there's only a small percentage. And that's my opinion, but I'm giving you some documented information and a documented example that what he told you to do was terrible advice and incorrect. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to dive into and show you, I'm trying to figure out where to start. But anyway, the premise of this is for every sport, and this is going to be a huge paradigm shift in my business, is that you want to have a unit goal for every sport. And I'm going to give you some examples, and you want to have a calendar cutoff date. And so if either of those two things happen, you're going to be done for the season. So if you hit your unit goal and it's early in the season or midway during the season, you're basically calling that sport a wrap. You're no longer going to wager on that sport. Or if you get to a point where you've hit that calendar date that you've come up with, you're going to call it a season. And the reason is that the market, and you can't wager, here's the overall premise of this. You can't wager early in the season for any sport, like college basketball. Let's start with that. College basketball season starts in November. Can't wager in November, right? Because you don't have sufficient data, at least the way that I do it, right? Because if you're model driven, what do you use in the beginning of the season? It's very, very difficult for the books to set a line, very difficult to profit. But after you have sufficient data via your model, that is the prime pickings for attacking a quote soft market. Because your model, if it's good, the market hasn't adjusted. So let's use college basketball. November, don't wager in November. December, January, prime 2 months to make profit in college basketball. You get to February, even into March. Now March, I think the season ends like mid-March, right before they announce the tournament. But those last 2 weeks, again, like any season, very difficult to assess motivation. Some teams are fighting to get in the tournament. Some teams know they're not going to make the tournament. Some of those teams not making the tournament might play really hard because they have nothing to lose. They're just trying to have fun. Maybe some guys trying to get drafted, and those other teams that are packing it in. It's very difficult to assess motivation. That's why later in the season, not good to wager. And that's true for every sport. So if I'm going to make a bold statement like this, let's back it up with some proof. So let's take a look. First off, let's dive into NCAA basketball. Now, know what I meant to do. First off, we have to go back to last year. So let's go back to 2024. Okay. Now you can see up there. So NCAA basketball, we had a very successful season for NCAA basketball last year, in the fall, 4.12 units. Now, if we look at the log, we went 24-19 up 4.12 units. Now, we just started wagering on December the 2nd. That's when we ran this model, December 2nd. And this is very important to note. So again, I said the most profitable times to attack college basketball would be not at the beginning, not at the end, December, January. So December, we turn a 4.12 unit profit. Okay. Very important to remember that. Now, for these sports, a good unit goal would be 10 units. And these are your smaller seasons, your shorter seasons. NCAA football starts in end of August, right? And then it's basically over in November. So you can't wager those first couple weeks. And I'll show you this example. We started like second week in September. And then by the end of October, that's pretty much the end of what I would consider a beatable market. And then at that point, you later in the season, very difficult. The other 10-unit goal season sport should be NCAA basketball, and then finally NFL. And if you think about NFL, for me, model guy, you can't wager those first 3 weeks. That's generally the minimum amount of data that I need. So you're going to start wagering on week 4. You're not going to wager those last 2 weeks, which is week 17 and 18. So you have between weeks 4 and 16 to wager. So very, very short season. So the whole premise of this is if you hit 10 units, NCAA football, NCAA basketball, NFL, you shut it down. Or let's say you're at 5 units in NCAA football and it's November 1st. End of the season, you shut it down because you've hit the calendar stoppage date. All right. So back to the NCAA basketball example. So 4.12 units for December, right? Now, remember, our goal overall for NCAA basketball would be 10 units. So I'm going to go back in time and show you how the correct way I would have done this. So we're at 4.12 units going into the new year. All right, so the new year hits. It's January. Model's still rocking and rolling for NCAA basketball. So we're 0.8 units here. If you look over here in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see our units now are minus 3 point. Am I looking at the right thing? Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. At some point, let's go all the way down to, let's just speed up this up. Go to January 17th. We were at 12.14 units, or if you back up a day, January the 16th, we were at 11.14 units. Let's just use this right here, 117. So on January the 17th, so from January 1 to January the 17th, we turned 12.14 units of profit. And what did we make back in December? Roughly 4 units. So we hit 16 units from December 2nd to January the 17th. So if we apply what I'm basically suggesting, we shut it down January the 17th. We have 16 units total for that sport. And if you go over here back to the betting log, instead of this being 2.38 units, this would be 12 units. Does that make sense? Because if we look what happened from 118 on, minus 9.76 units. And it's not that the model sucks. It's just that the market gets tighter. I mean, you look at some of these dogs here. None of we didn't play it. We cashed 0 dogs. In fact, the model itself, very difficult to find any dogs via the model. You look here, we played Ole Miss plus 550. You're not going to get Ole Miss plus 550. George Mason plus 290. You're not going to get George Mason at plus 290. There's a plus 165 dog, plus 107, plus 131, plus 155. So again, there's one example that what I'm suggesting is a legit way to do this. Now, let's do the baseball example because it's super fascinating. Now, baseball would be what I would consider the goal for baseball would be a 20 unit goal. So for NHL, NBA, MLB, 20 units at any point that season, you hit 20 units, potentially shut it down. A lot of that would depend on the calendar as well. So let's dive into this, and I'll show you last year because this is a really good example. Betting Live 2024, MLB, we go down here to the bottom. So you can see there are 34.82 units. Now let's go all the way to the bottom. So we started wagering on Major League Baseball May the 13th. Very important. When does Major League Baseball season start? It starts, second week of April, I think, something like that, maybe April 6th, 7th. So we're basically a month in. And again, going back to what I'm proposing us do long term. So the calendar, the calendar to wager baseball, we're not going to wager in April because that's the beginning of the season. So when it's the softest is going to be May, June, July, August. So 4 months. All right. Now, let's take a look at this. So we start May the 13th. If you look down the bottom right, you'll see the units start to add up there. So look at this. Now, this is amazing. 524. And this is good to talk about this because this is a real life situation. So basically what I'm proposing is you would shut it down at once you hit your unit goal, right? But I think too, that's why I think having the calendar there to help you as well. So if you're at 20 units on May the 24th, you're still in what we would consider a soft market or the prime calendar season to turn profit. So here, obviously we didn't shut it down, and I wouldn't think it would be wise to shut it down because it's May the 24th, you're up 20 units. You still have June, July, and August. So you have the potential to have a really, really huge season. So in this case, I would keep going, and that's what I did. All right, now let's take this all the way to what I just suggested, July. July 31st, we were at 35.24 units. So this is August 27th. You can see on August 27th, we're at 51 units. At this point, I should have shut this down because again, going back to what I just said, don't wager in April. The peak seasons of profit, May, June, July, August, 4 months. So August 27th at 51 units. I never hit 50 units for any sport. That's the day we should have shut it down. Actually, I think it got to 52 because there's one more space here. That's not going to show it. But look what happens from August the 28th through September 9th. Minus 17.38 units. There's your second proof example of having a calendar goal and a unit goal for every sport. All right. Now we're going to do NHL from last year. So this was on 127. So this is 2024 January 27th of 2024. Now, let's talk about NHL. NHL season starts in October, right? Am I thinking right? Yeah, October. So then your peak profit seasons, and again, this is a long season. So again, going back to our unit goal will be 20, and then we have a calendar goal. So let's think this out. So you're not going to wager in October. So you have November, December, January, February, March, and maybe not even March. And we'll look at it. But if we're going to make it the same as MLB, we would say November, December, January, February. Okay. And let's see if that's true. So we'll go through this here from January the 27th of last year, NHL model. All right. February 7th, we're at 5.23 units. February the 19th, we're at 8.73 units. Have a really good run right here. Now we're at 13 units through February. Let's see where we're at the end of February. We were at 13.84 units at the end of February. And if we go another month, all the way to March the 31st, we're at 19.07 units. So at that point, 331 again, a great season would be 20 units. We were at 19. In fact, let's go back. Let's see this date, 330. So let's look at the day before that, because I think we probably did hit over 20 right here. 328. So I'm trying to make it look like it was a live. Okay, 21 units. So it's at 21 units on 328. The prime betting calendar season for NHL would be not October, November, December, January, February, March. We're at the end of it. We've hit 21 units. We're out. So that would be application of that. Now let's see what happens from 330 until the end of the actual betting log. Minus 1.82 units. So not as bad as NCAA basketball. Well, I haven't even done NCAA football. We're going to do that. But there was no need to wager this late. So MLB in the month of September was not profitable. NHL in the month of April was not profitable. In our NCAA basketball example here, even late January was not profitable. Now let's look at NCAA football. And this is absolutely mind-blowing. All right, so I actually started on 9-7. And I split. I probably shouldn't have started that early. I think there was a reason for this. We won the Purdue money line, missed with Auburn. So that's basically a wash there. But anyway, so let's move along. So now, again, can't wager those first 2 or 3 weeks in August. I think it starts around August 20th. And then, so you really technically start about mid-September. And now you're going to have from mid-September to the end of October. And let's see if this is true, what I'm suggesting. So model's doing good here, 1.84 units. Look in the lower right-hand corner, 7.67 units. And look at that date. Well, let's back up. So going into, 10/19, we're at 9.83 units. 9.83 units, 10/19. So again, this would probably be the point you would stop. Because again, if the goal is 10 units, 9.83 we're there. What's the date? The date is 10/19. What is the cutoff? November. So let's see what happens from 10/26 on. So 9.83 units from 10/26 on. This is mind-blowing. I remember this. Guys, minus 14.92 units. So what I'm suggesting is actually the correct way to wager, and it's something I'm going to do moving forward. Now, if you really want to get sick, let's add all this up. So we had, let's see, baseball peaked out at 50 units, 52 units. I think we ended at 35. So that's like 17 units. This model here netted out. Yeah, what would be the difference from where we were? So we ended up with minus 4 units. So that's another 10. That's 9.83 units there. We had 12 for college basketball. And what am I missing, y'all? Did I do them all? Yeah, NCAA football would have been 9.83. Baseball would have been 17. College basketball would be 12. So just those 3 examples there, that's 38.83 units we left on the table. And had we adopted the unit goal concept and incorporated a calendar stoppage point for wagering, we would have gained 38.83 units. Instead, during that time, lost 38.83 units. That's wild, right? And so And I put this on Instagram a couple of days ago. I said, I'm going to talk about the worst mistake, a huge mistake I made. And I think if you don't, I don't know if I'd really classify this as a mistake now in retrospect. It's just part of the learning cycle. You have to be committed to being extremely critical of yourself and recognizing something as a mistake, an area you can improve on, and then moving on from that. Because if I don't adopt this and say, hey, the way that I'm currently wagering is incorrect, it's a mistake, you're never going to grow. Athletes make mistakes, professional golfers make mistakes, it's part of it. But what you do with that information moving forward is 100% on you. So we're using this opportunity to grow and get better. Now, the good news is that even with this, if you look at last year, even with all that regression, we still had 47.04 units. So again, going back to the premise I've always said, if you make good wagers every single day, there's a huge margin of error in this business, but you can still be profitable. And even if you go to this year here, even with that, we're still profitable at 0.93, basically up a unit. And there's a lot of cappers probably already buried, 10, 15 units in the hole for 2025. So again, to review all this, really what I think we should do is, again, and I'm going to probably make a legit coaching video for clients, but if you're not a client, you're listening to this, it's very simple. NCAA football, NCAA basketball, NFL, 10-unit goal. And then also you need to have a calendar with that as well of when you're going to stop wagering. If it's near the end of that calendar, if it's that example with college football, if you're 10 units up and it's October the 20th, you're done. NHL, NBA, MLB, unit goal would be 20 units for those sports. And again, we talked about the calendar as well for NHL. You would run it through March would be the end at that point. So if you were, 12 units and it's the end of March, you're basically done. Because again, in all of those examples I showed you, what happened at the end, we kept wagering. They were all negative. And it's because the market adjusts. It's hard to find value, and it's just the way it is. This business is a lot harder now than it was when I started, 11 years ago. Very difficult. And so incorporating this concept, I think will give us an edge, because I think most people will continue to wager, whereas we're setting unit goals and then basically attacking that sport, that market when it's the softest, and letting everybody else play when there's, quote, no value. So anyway, hopefully we got through that. Super fascinating, and greatly appreciate you guys sticking around, listening to this podcast. And that concludes episode 45. Talk to you guys this week. Peace.